Let's take a look now at a special group of those who resisted. We've spoken about resistance before, and here are some of our key points. Hopefully these are clear in your mind. This video is going to focus on a group that we should really give a little bit of attention to, sometimes called the rescuers, often called the upstanders because they were neither perpetrators of violence or bystanders, even though they may have even started as perpetrators or bystanders, what are often referred to as the righteous among the nations. Now, this group are really special. We need to think about them, and at times it's worth having an idea of who some of these people were. If we had time, we could even explore those here, but that's something maybe to do in your own readings, perhaps even watching videos and movies and watching things on Netflix, which there's many, many wonderful stories of these people who are the upstanders. When we're talking about them, it's worth knowing that many of the upstanders, many of the people who saved so many Jews, so many others who would have ended up in concentration camps, exterminated amongst the 6 million Jews and up to 11 million total people who died at the hands of the Nazis in camps, they actually started out as bystanders. In the early stage of the Holocaust, in that period, perhaps 1933 to 1938, they felt it wasn't their problem. They weren't Jewish. It's not something they should get involved in. They wanted to follow the law. They didn't want to cause any trouble. Perhaps they were afraid themselves. Perhaps they had business interests at risk. All those reasons we say to ourselves at times of not standing up to bullies. For a variety of reasons, they decided to aid the Jews and Jewish organisations, perhaps aid the Allies. They decided to help individual Jewish friends, individual others in some way. They took steps to save lives rather than take lives, to rescue them. The consequences of being a rescuer, a friend of the Jews, an upstander, the people who become known as righteous amongst the nation, are amazingly extreme. Not only were they putting their own lives at risk if they were caught by the Gestapo and the SS, but the lives of their entire families. In some cases, their entire village would be shot if one person in the village took action to help the Jews. Certainly, they ran the risk of at least internment in a concentration camp themselves, in a work camp, a labour camp. Not being a Jew, in some areas, it wasn't necessarily that they would be sent to a death camp, but they would suffer as others would, such as prison of war in labour camps and so on. Many, of course, did run the risk, particularly in Poland, in the Nazi governments in Poland, of being sent to one of the 6 major extermination camps. Certainly, imprisonment was on the cards, and definitely torture, to see what information they had at the hands of the Geheimstaatspolizei, the secret state police. Who were these people? Well, most of them were just ordinary people. They came from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all levels of education, all different religious denominations. Some, like Oskar Schindler, for example, had even joined the Nazi Party, although Schindler himself probably did so as an opportunist to make money, to have connections. Schindler's a very interesting person in the sense that his moral compass was off from a lot of standards. The famous case of the zookeeper, and I'd urge you perhaps to watch, beautiful movie, The Zookeeper's Wife, which Yad Vashem says is perhaps one of the most accurate portrayals of the life and the risk taken by an upstander. A large number of Jews were rescued by a zookeeper and his wife in Krakow in Poland. A large proportion of the Danish nation, struggling to get the words out, the Danish nation in Denmark stood up and helped the Jews escape to Sweden. Large groups of fishermen, small fishing boats, took Jews out of the country as the Nazis were going to round them up. We have the case of Sugihara, the Asian Japanese diplomat who rescued Jews. We even have stories of Muslims who lived in Europe risking their lives to rescue Jews, which, given the current state of the world where there's so much division against and criticism of Muslims, In southern Europe, Muslims risked their life to save Jews. There's no boundaries of different religions and so on. What did they do? Well, if you are an upstander, hiding Jews in your home. The very famous story of Anne Frank being hidden in a home in the Netherlands until she was caught. We know there are about 27,000 of these righteous who did things like that. What else did they do? They smuggled. They assisted Jews to escape. There were bakers who hid Jews in piles and bags of flowers. There were plumbers who hid Jews under piles of bricks. There were garbage collectors who hid Jews and moved them out of the ghettos under piles of garbage in their trucks. The zookeeper, for example, hid Jews, getting them out of the ghettos, under piles of feed for his animals. They actually were hidden in the underground cages where animals were meant to be kept to save them from the cold and winter. They would give false identity, false papers. Some Jewish children had their hair dyed blonde. They were sent to Catholic schools where they were taught by the nuns as if they were Catholics. If they were very small children, they may not have even known their Jewish identity themselves, that their family hid them entirely. They were taught ways of fitting in. So take a moment just to think about these upstanders. So many of them, over 27,000, have been identified by name, that are heroes to the Jewish people, who rescue, who resist, in addition to all of the other forms of resistance that took place during the period 1933 to 1945.